Okay. So the point of this study session is to go over the expectations for the exam, which are really similar to the expectations for the midterm. And then also to go through the questions that are now available to you. They opened up last night at midnight. You probably haven't had a chance to take a look at them yet, but they're available for you. So we'll take a look at those and we'll go question by question. And if you have any questions about the questions, I will answer your questions. Keyword there is questions. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. Alrighty. All right, and I'm going to take us to our Canvas site. Okay, so if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, right, this is the final exam and information and study session. This is where you find the final exam questions. So if you click there, I'll just click on there right now. You know, you can click there to download the questions. Those are available for you. But let's take a look at this final exam information and study session so that we get an idea of what the expectations are. Okay, so all right, so this exam basically covers the second half of the semester from topic 7 to topic 11, topic 12, from 7 to 12. But as I've been telling my other classes that, you know, feel free to pull on any material that we've covered during the course of this semester. And so if you want to bring in information from the first half of the semester, that's totally fine. You don't have to, but if you're like, oh, that's a good example, or this will help me clarify my full point, you know, don't hesitate. You can use all the material for the semester. The final exam is worth a lot. It's worth 210 points out of the 1,000. And so it's 21% of your final grade. So it's a pretty significant chunk of your final grade. That being said, it's kind of a beneficial thing because if you do well on the final exam, you can improve your grade. And also I tend to, if students really rock it and do great on the final exam, I take that into consideration as I am figuring out final grades. Usually I'm a pretty much a stickler. You know, I look at your final grade and I give you the grade that you earned. But for the final exam, if you do really well, I'll take that into consideration, right? Because it's like, hey, you've improved, you figured out from the midterm how to improve to the final. So I will take that into consideration. As was the case for the midterm exam, the expected length of this exam should be between about 8 pages or 2 pages a question. If you're a little bit under, that's fine. If you're a little bit over, that's fine too. But you know, if you're taking only a page to answer the question, it's probably not enough. And if it's, you know, if your exam is like 13 pages long, that, you know, that's not good. So try to keep, but if it's 10 pages, no harm, no foul. Do keep in mind, I do like you to include the question that you're answering in the exam. And the questions are kind of long, so that won't be counted against your page count. Just so don't worry about that. You know, it's the page count is really just what you're writing. And so like as was the case with the final or the midterm exam, these are just some things to keep in mind or to remind you to do while you're answering the questions. So for one, there's in each question, there are multiple prompts. So just like with our discussion posts, make sure you answer all of the prompts. And often there will be a critical thinking prompt, usually towards the end of the question. Don't throw away that prompt. Like, you know, like usually the better people do on the critical thinking prompt, those are the people who are going to get A's on the answers, right? Because they are like not just describing things, but they're actually able to evaluate and use their critical thinking skills. So when it comes to that final prompt question, that's oftentimes a critical thinking question, you know, try your best to kind of develop your response. As was the case with the midterm, I want you to use all the course material to answer the questions on the exam. And so that would include the textbook, the lectures, any articles that we've read, and also any videos. I mean, we've watched some, you know, we've watched some videos this semester. And so feel free to pull upon all the material. So if you're only using the textbook to answer the questions, you're going to lose points for that. If you're only relying on the lectures, you're going to lose points. And if you don't pull in an article that would work real well, I'll kind of wonder why you didn't do that. You don't have to do it for each question. If one question you answer and you're primarily using lecture, that's fine. But as long as you're using the textbook and articles in other part of the exam, I'm looking at sort of the total picture for that. So keep that in mind when you're answering the questions. And then proofread, please use paragraphs. I should actually include that in my outlines here, or my recommendations. Students don't tend to use paragraphs anymore. It really helps. It's easier to grade, and also it helps define your thoughts. So make sure you do some proofreading, get rid of errors, and use paragraphs if you're not using paragraphs. And then as for the citations, just it's the same as the midterm exam. You shouldn't really need to use external materials unless it's like a contemporary example from a news media article or something, or just something that's like, oh, I read about this and this is a good example. You can use that, but just don't look things up on the internet to get answers. I mean, the answers are in the textbook and in the lecture material. And then just make sure that you're citing, and you can just do in-text citations. You don't need to have a works cited or a bibliography page at the end. And if you are using direct quotes, whether those are from the textbook or from the lectures, make sure you put those in quotation marks, since they are if you don't do that, then it's sort of plagiarism. It's not sort of plagiarism, it is plagiarism. So make sure you put those in quotations, okay? And then you've got the exam today, and you've got several days to work on it. And so the exam is due no later than Saturday, December 18th at 11:59 p.m. Okay. If you want to turn it in earlier, great, but you don't have to, but that's when it is due. All right. So that being said, do you guys have any questions about the expectations? All right. Hearing none, let's go ahead and take a look at the exam questions then. So let me pull those up. Okay. So as was the case for the midterm exam, that there are 6 questions on the exam, and you choose 4 to answer. Okay, so it's the 4 that you want, and make sure you include the question in the, as you're answering it. A couple of things. Once you download the exam, make sure you save it to your desktop, a hard drive, or to a zip drive. Over the years, I've had so many students who lose their work. And so make sure that when you download it, immediately save it, so that and hopefully have auto save on as you're working. If not, save, as you go along. It almost needs to not be said. However, it's good to be reminded. The exam is worth 210 points. And so each question is worth 52.5 points. So I was just going to say 52, which would make it 208, but I'm sure somebody would say, where are the other 2 points? And they're just basically going to be, sort of freebie points, but I do kind of figure out my grading scale by that crazy 0.5. Since this is the final exam, and I've been teaching for a long time, and a lot of times students don't look at the comments on their final exam. They're just looking for the grade. They're ready to move on, get ready, go have fun for the holiday break. So if you want me to put comments on your final exam about your performance, please let me know. And the way you do that is when you upload your test, just put, hey, professor, I'd love to have some comments. And I'd love to give you comments. I like giving comments, but I also don't like to make lots of comments and then see that students never actually viewed the document. So it's sort of like a lot of work that kind of goes wasted. So just let me know when you submit your exam that you'd like comments. And if you forget to do that, just drop me a text, email, or you can even go back into Canvas and let me know. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at the questions. So the first one has to do with marriage. And so the textbook identifies 3 theories of gender roles in marriage. Those 3 theories are coverture, separate but equal, or shared partnership. For this question, I want you to pick one of those theories. And so I want you to describe in detail one of these theories. And I want you to make sure that you include how this theory was reflected in policy governing marriage and family, making sure to include divorce and child custody. A lot of times when students answer this question, they just talk about marriage, but your textbook talks about how the theory of coverture, right, that women kind of don't have any legal rights and they're just kind of ruled over by the male. They talk about that in marriage, but then they don't talk about the implications for that for divorce and the implications for that on child custody. So make sure you go there in terms of public policy. And so then also include the feminist critique of these theories, and they all have critiques, and also the social and economic factors that contributed to the erosion of the theories, in particular, coverture and separate but equal, okay? You'll want to focus on the erosion of that theory, although there's some erosion to it, that shared partnership as well. So for this answer, before you jump in and talk about policy, just make sure you just sort of clearly outline the parameters of coverture or the key values of coverture or separate but equal, et cetera. Then go on and talk about specific policy. Okay. So that's that question. I'll just open it up. Are there any questions about that question? All right, hearing none. We've done a lot of work on prostitution this semester, right? Had a lecture on it, had a discussion on it. A lot of people wrote their public policy papers on it. But when it comes to regulating sexuality, prostitution is only part of it. Pornography is the other part of it. Okay. And so in lecture and in the textbook, they talked about pornography, and you're going to get an opportunity to talk about that in the exam. So as we know, liberal and radical feminists have different points of views on many things. And so liberal and radical feminists have very different perspectives on pornography. First, I want you to define pornography. That's in lecture, and they also talk about it in the textbook. And I want you to talk about what is the difference between pornography and obscenity. And that's in lecture and textbook as well. And when it comes to the First Amendment, is pornography considered a form of expression, right? The First Amendment talks about that Congress shall make no law abridging our speech. So is pornography considered an expression that is protected by the First Amendment? Make sure you explain, okay? So first, set out just sort of like, this is pornography, this is how it's different from obscenity, and what its relationship to the First Amendment is. Then I want you to explain the liberal and radical feminist perspectives regarding pornography. Very different, and kind of know where they stand given their stand on other things, including the reasons underpinning these perspectives and the policy responses that reflect these viewpoints. Okay, so they have a viewpoint, but they also took action, to implement their viewpoint, and so through policy. So make sure you include that, and then the critical thinking prompt. Of these two, which perspective are you most in agreement with? Why? And explain your answer. Okay. So question 2. Madison, do you have a question about question 2?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Sydney or Julia, question about question 2?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay.
No, thank you.
All right, cool. The third question is about sexual assault. And so I know you guys know the difference between sexual assault and sexual harassment, but I just want to highlight that this question, don't make the sort of the error of thinking this is about sexual harassment. This is about sexual assault, right? Which is a criminal offense. And so, which would include like unwanted touching, consensual sex, et cetera. So it's about physical contact for the most part. And so in lecture and in textbook, we really talked a lot about the changes in sexual assault policy. And so I want you first to describe the common law or the pre-1960s definition of sexual assault. If you recall that the definition of rape was really, really narrow, and the only sort of offense, criminal offense, was rape, and every other kind of sexual assault wasn't considered a criminal offense for the most part. And so describe the common law definition of sexual assault. What is that pre-1960s common law understanding of sexual assault? Tell us about the assumptions regarding sex and gender roles in that time period. And then starting in the 1960s and 70s, as we know, feminists worked hard to reform sexual assault law, and it's a reflected in the policies that we have today. So describe these reforms. You don't have to describe them all, but in lecture and textbook, it talks about the way feminists wanted to change sexual assault law. And the critical thinking piece of these reforms, which do you think have been the most important, successful in addressing sexual assault? Explain. And that when it comes to sexual assault policy or law, what are some suggestions for improvement? Okay, because we also sort of, the textbook talks about how there's still improvements to be made. Okay. And here you can bring in, when it comes to sexual assault, you can bring in Title IX, the Violence Against Women's Act, okay, because those have to do, that's also policy. You don't have to include that, but, sexual assault on campus is implicated, or Title IX is implicated when it comes to sexual assault on campus, as is the Violence Against Women's Act. Any questions about question 3? Okay, pretty straightforward and an important question. So you get a chance to do Title IX if you want. Describe Title IX and the impact it's had on gender and education in the United States. What were the goals of the law? When the law was implemented, what were some of the major controversies concerning the law? Making sure to address the debates regarding gender equity in sports. Okay, so there were lots of controversies with Title IX beyond sports, but make sure you do address sports, right, in the controversy. And then, has Title IX achieved its goals? Why or why not? Explain. And so in this, you can bring in the video that we watched from the historian on Title IX. You can bring in examples from Keepers of the Game if you think it's relevant. And there's also, lecture and textbook to pull upon. Okay. Any questions on that question? All right. So the second to last topic that we did had to do with protective labor law. And so we talked about the different categories of protective labor law. So explain the reasons behind why protective labor law was enacted, as well as the reason for the shift away from these laws towards laws focused on workplace equity, gender equity, where we are today. Okay. And then I want you to think about feminism. Did feminists approve of the shift away from protective labor law initially from the workplace gender equity law? Okay. And then where were feminists on this issue? Did they approve or not? Why or why not? Explain. And you could also say that some feminists did, some feminists didn't. Okay, you can include that and explain. So that's a pretty straightforward question about the protective labor law. Okay, so here we're talking about the kinds of labor laws that says women can only work so many hours, or women must be paid a minimum wage, right? So that's, just to refresh your memory, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about protective labor laws. The labor laws we have today are that, equal pay for equal work, and women and men being treated equally in terms of applying for jobs, etc. Any questions on that question? Pretty straightforward. And then the last question has to do with the feminization of poverty, what you just got out of. So in describing the concept of the feminization of poverty, the textbook states that poverty is a different condition for women than for men, and that policymakers should take these differences into account. Okay. So first I want you to, and then it gives the page number from the textbook where that quote is derived. So first I want you to explain what this statement means using examples from course material to help clarify your explanation. And that the course material could be the videos that you watched for this, including my lecture, but there were other videos that you watched as well, and then material from the textbook. And then, and also the articles that were included as well. There's a whole article about sort of the way poverty impacts people of color more significantly, particularly women of color. So thinking of the policies in the United States that are designed to address poverty and economic well-being, assess to what degree, if at all, these policies recognize that poverty and economic insecurity impact women and men differently. And so that there's a lot of policies suggested in your textbook about how to alleviate or minimize poverty for women. And if you find these policies fail to properly address the feminization of policy, how might these policies be improved? Explain your actions. And if you find that these policies effectively address the feminization of poverty, explain why. And then there's a note in tiny print, I'm not sure why, it says, you do not need to address all of the economic policies discussed in the textbook. Select one or two that best help you answer that question, okay? Because there's a lot. And so, you don't have to say for each of the policies, just select one or two that helps you most effectively answer that question, okay? All right, any questions about question 6? All right, so hearing none, I'm going to stop the share and bring us back here. Okay, so that's what you've got yourself signed up for. I always tell students to select the questions that you feel best equipped to answer, okay? But also don't hesitate to challenge yourself. I mean, so some questions are a little bit more difficult to answer. And sometimes when students, pick a question that's maybe a little bit more difficult, that I'm happy to see them do that. But that's just your judgment to make, challenge yourself if you feel comfortable. If not, it's fine if you just go with the questions you feel strongest in terms of answering. As for grading, I think I'm caught up in this class on grading. So all of your discussion posts have been graded except for the one you turned in yesterday, the one on the gender pay gap. And also the policy papers have not been graded. Obviously, those were just turned in. So I'm going to try my best to get all of that stuff graded by when you turn in your final exam on December 18th. Shooting for it. All 3 of my classes have papers due this week. I'm insane. But I'm shooting for that. I don't have anything else to do right now, but to grade. So you should have a pretty good idea of where you're at, with your grade right now, but also, once you get your policy paper grade, you'll even have a better sense of that. Okay. And then also when it comes to the final grade for this class, I shoot to have final grades done by December 23rd. And then I post them on Canvas and I send out an announcement and I say, take a look at your grade. Let me know if there's any abnormalities or inconsistencies, or if you're angry about something, you could say, change my grade. I'll listen to you, but probably won't change it, but we'll see what you have to say. And then after that 24-hour period passes, then I post the grades on pause. So your grade should be reflected in pause if everything goes as according to plan by Christmas Eve, by December 24th. Okay. So that's what you can expect from me in terms of like getting your grades. Okay. All right. Well, that's it for me. Do you guys have any questions? I'll just go around. Madison, any questions?
I do not. Thank you, though.
You're welcome. Sydney?
No.
Julia?
Nope, all good.
All right, great. Well, thanks for your hard work this semester. I teach all my classes online, so I'm online a lot of the time. So don't hesitate to text me, call me, drop me an email, or contact me through Canvas as you're working on your exam. And if you have any questions, okay, I'm here and available to help you. All right, have a good holiday. Good luck with your finals, and I'll talk to you again soon, okay?
Thank you, you too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Oh, Miss Hankinson,
Yes.
I just wanted to tell you that I absolutely, oh, sorry, there's an announcement going on. I absolutely love your class, and I think all of your posts are really cool.
Well, thank you so much. That makes me so happy to hear. It's weird when you're teaching an online class that you kind of only get an inkling of how students are doing, although usually I get a somewhat of a sense. So it's really great to hear that. I really appreciate it. And good luck with your choice of college, and I hope things go well with you in the future. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.